So Fire and Ice has always been a staple in gaming, and we're combining those two to make a powerful Warlock build that hangs with the best of them. This build will actually get stronger tomorrow with the release of Act 2, and the artifact mod called Solar Fulmination, where your ignitions do increased damage in an increased radius. But what I think is even better is that this build is so easy to use, yet very strong, whether you're solo or with a group. You bring some of the best crowd control at its finest by freezing everything in sight. You bring great damage with shatter and ignitions, which can just chunk enemies down, and then great passive damage with the Unravel debuff, Scorch debuff, and your Solar Buddy just doing continuous damage. Now in this solo grandmaster here, in this first room, I made a point not to use my super Song of Flame, so you could see how strong the base build is all on its own. I know a lot of people struggle with these 2 barrier champions and how they just make everything immune in here, but your Fire and Ice will handle that very easily. This build is then made only better by incorporating Transcendence and your super, because we all know how strong those two are on the Prismatic Warlock. But before we jump into the details, we have a sponsor. This video is sponsored by Raycon. As gamers, we're always looking for great everyday earbuds that help cut out that outside noise. Well, Raycon's everyday earbuds just got a lot better with their new feature, active noise cancellation. And you all know how we hate hearing that outside noise. The best part is that you get the same great audio quality that you expect from the big guys, but at half the price with Raycon everyday earbuds. That's a pretty good deal already. The upgraded Raycon's everyday earbuds now have an awesome ergonomic design and multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with 2 devices at once. They have a long 32-hour battery life and are weatherproof and sweat resistant. These are the most comfortable earbuds I've tried on, so when I'm getting my healthy steps in, since I work at the desk all day, they're not falling out of my ears or being uncomfortable in any way. I use them when I'm editing my videos as well, since they never cause any discomfort. So make sure you guys click the link down below at the top of the description, or go to buyraycon.com/plunder to get 15% off your Raycon purchase. Plus you get free shipping with that as well. So make sure you guys take advantage of this deal, and I know you won't be disappointed. And thank you so much to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. Now, of course, for your super, you do take Song of Flame. This is a Fire and Ice build, and we're beefing up those ignitions starting tomorrow anyways, and you're going to set off a ton of ignitions with this super. I do like to take Healing Rift in Grandmasters with this build. I normally opt for Phoenix Dive because it has about a 20-second shorter cooldown, but we're going to make up in getting that Rift back with mods later on, and Healing Rift just gives you continuous restoration as long as you're in that Rift, and it's very nice in Grandmaster content, and it's just a lot easier to use if you're looking for something easier. And then for your melee, we do take Arcane Needle. Now you might think with a Fire and Ice build that you would take Incinerator Snap here, and yes, in easier content you could totally do that. But in more difficult content, 1, having 3 melee charges, 2, you're applying the Unravel debuff to entire rooms with this, and then 3, with Transcendence being a thing, your melee damage feeds your grenade ability in Transcendence, right? And vice versa. So when you have 3 melee abilities to feed your Transcendence grenade, it just makes your Transcendence form that much better. The grenade we choose is the Cold Snap grenade, and we're gonna beef this thing up. It freezes on impact and sends another seeker to find and freeze targets. This is your main source of crowd control, and then for your 2 aspects, we pair that with Feed the Void. Defeating a target with any ability activates Devour. We get a full heal on kill, and get a nice 20% of our grenade energy coming back to us on every kill while this is active. That's just another source to feed those Cold Snap grenades, and we pair that with the Hellion aspect. This is when we pop that Healing Rift, we get that Solar Buddy. It does great damage even in difficult content. It scorches enemies and will cause 2 or 3 ignitions in its 1 lifetime. Ignitions do great damage, especially if you have a solar burn going on in whatever activity you're doing. And then like I mentioned earlier, the Fulmination mod will only beef this up even more. And the first thing we pair that with as far as fragments goes is Facet of Ruin. This increases the size and damage of the burst of our stasis shatter, which those infinite Cold Snap grenades we're throwing out is going to do great shatter damage to everything. And then this increases the area effect of our solar ignitions, which again, pair that with Solar Fulmination, the ignitions do more damage and an increased radius, then an even bigger increased area of effect with Facet of Ruin. Next we take Facet of Courage. Your Arc, Solar, and Void abilities deal increased damage to targets afflicted with Darkness debuffs. This is mainly for that Solar Mortar. It's just going to do extra damage. Ignitions will do extra damage. Anything we're doing with our Solar will just do extra damage to anything that's frozen or anything that is unraveled by our melee. So 2 different ways to be proccing this, and that's including our Song of Flame super. Next we take Faceted Protection, just extra damage reduction when we're near enemies. With having so many frozen targets out on the field, it's easy to be next to them, especially when you're playing with a group, and this is even increased when you're in that Transcendence form. For the fourth fragment, we take Facet of Solitude. Since you're freezing everything and crowd controlling it and letting your mortar go off, you're going to be just firing your weapon constantly. This means that landing rapid precision hits amidst that Severing Blast, which just cuts their outgoing damage by 40%, which is great against high health targets, bosses, or champions. And while you're Transcendent, the Severing Blast is even bigger. And then lastly, we take Facet of Dominance. I think this one is a flex spot here. You could swap this out for something else if you want, but I do like that your Void Grenades weaken targets, and this pairs nicely with your Transcendence form. Since that freezing singularity has a pretty big area of effect, while you're weakening everything that's in it for a 15% debuff, then that slow field will end up freezing and shattering enemies, so you're getting the extra shattered damage from Facet of Ruin, and then when the black hole implodes, it's suppressing and dealing heavy damage to all nearby targets. And it just allows that damage to be even better because you do have that weakening debuff on them, and we're running Facet of Courage, so if they're unraveled or frozen, the Void damage is even more, because Void does increase damage to darkness debuff targets. Now for our exotic of choice, we pair all of that with Osmiomancy Gloves. This has been a staple exotic, especially for Stasis Warlocks for a very long time now, and it basically just allows us to have infinite Cold Snap grenades when your Cold Snap hits a target or travels on the ground and freezes targets. So you can basically get a full charge back when you hit a champion and 2 small red bar enemies. You also get an extra charge of your Cold Snap grenades, so you have 2 of them, and then that just pairs nicely with Devour, so even if you only freeze 1 or 2 targets, while you kill those 2 targets, you're basically back to a full grenade again, because Devour gives us such a big chunk of our grenade back on kills. Now you could get Spirit of Osmiomancy on a class item, and this would work the same, except you do lose that extra Cold Snap charge. So it's kind of up to you if you want to slot that in, but I do like the extra charge. I like throwing out 2 Cold Snap grenades at the beginning of a fight, then either popping my Super or Transcendence and going in. You could pair any kind of weapons you want with the build. Anything to do with Stasis or Solar would be pretty cool. Since I was in the Grandmaster, I did opt for Outbreak Perfected because I needed to deal with barrier champions, but something like Dragon's Breath in your heavy with Solar Ignitions would be awesome, and weapons are pretty much up to you unless you need to match Grandmaster content. For mods on the build, the most important part is the gauntlets. We take 2 copies of Bolstering Detonation. This grants class ability energy upon dealing grenade ability damage. Your Cold Snap grenades do actually damage targets very little when it freezes and attaches to an enemy. Well, this is on a 7-second cooldown. Since you're throwing so many, you're activating this every 7 seconds, and this gives you 17% grenade energy back. So you only need a couple times of this to proc to get a full rift back. But we're also pairing that with Focusing Strike. Grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a powered melee. This gives us 12% of our class ability back, and since you're taking Threaded Needle with 3 charges, and when you're in Transcendence you're using this a lot, you're gonna have that rift up all the time. On your helmet, just take mods that match whatever weapons you're using to create Orbs of Power, and then I also opted for a heavy ammo finder. The chest piece is your damage reduction, and maybe a reserves mod for whatever heavy you're using. On the boots, again, weapon surges to match whatever weapons you're using. Since I was using Outbreak Perfected, I had 2 kinetic weapon surges on there to do a 17% increased damage with that primary, but just match whatever weapons you're using. And then on the class item, we take Time Dilation to make those armor charges last 15 seconds instead of 10. So if you get 3 armor charges, you're up to a 45-second damage window buff on those charges. And then a Reaper, where we can spawn an Orb of Power after using our class ability on our weapon kill. Since you're popping that rift quite often, it's just nice to grab an extra Orb of Power here and there. You don't really need any particular stats for the build to work since all of the ability regen comes within the build, but I would aim for 100 resilience for that damage reduction in all activities. It's too good to pass up. Then aim for high recovery and high discipline. Recovery is your rift ability and discipline is of course your grenade. I hope you guys enjoyed the build. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Have a great rest of your day.